We got a season in the books. Every time we have a season in the books now, it seems more and more it's very popular to see a lot of the national websites and a lot of the national media types talk about all the things that are wrong with college football and everything that we need to fix with college football. And I am of a little bit different mentality. I like to celebrate what's good about the sport. That doesn't mean occasionally you don't have something that needs to be fixed. Okay, I'm not above fixing what's wrong with the sport. It's just that some of the things that are being pointed out as flaws with the sport, I don't view as flaws. Or if I do, I don't share what popular opinion is on how to fix them. So I also tell you all the time, I am not a believer that just because someone's upset, it means something's wrong. I'm not a believer that just because you're not getting the outcome you want or I'm not getting the outcome I want, it means that something needs to be changed. Like, people being upset is not an automatic reason to change anything. But that is not the overwhelming sentiment right now. So the overwhelming sentiment is once we expand the college football playoff, then we'll be good. I've done many a segment on this. I'm not going to focus solely on expanding the playoff. But I know a lot of you, even in this audience, you believe that would solve a lot. So most of the sentiment that I get on this is, well, if we expand the playoff, it'll give more teams a shot. Okay. If we expand the playoff, it'll give more teams a shot. And then because more teams make the playoff, then recruiting will even out. You won't have such a monopolistic stranglehold of just a few teams getting all the best recruits, because now recruits will see that I can go to more places and make the playoff. Hey, I talked to a lot of recruits. I talked to the big boys. I have yet to have one of them tell me on their list of priorities is making the playoff. That's not what they talk about. I haven't talked about this a whole lot live. There is this huge detachment in what recruits value versus what you think they value, but I'll leave it alone. I'll play devil's advocate. I'll pretend that you're dead on the money with that. Let's move on. Also, some of you guys think that if we expand the playoff, then we'll have more meaningful games, and that means less opt-outs late in the season. And, again, that loosens the stranglehold on just the few elites having a death grip on college football. I am telling you unequivocally, recruiting is not evening out if you expand the playoff. I am telling you that. I know a lot of you don't believe that. You are going to have to learn it the hard way. What aggravates me is the retort sometimes that I get on someone that can't put a well-fashioned argument together to counter that. They say, well, it wouldn't hurt to try. Yeah, here's the problem. Expanding a playoff is like squeezing toothpaste out of the tube. Okay? You say, well, let's just try it. It isn't trying. It's like expanding government. Once it expands, it never contracts. Once you expand the college football playoff, I know it's not going back. Okay? You can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. So you're going to have to excuse me if I value the regular season in this sport, and I think it's the most precious and in some cases priceless commodity in this sport, and you want to devalue it because you want to run experiments with the end of the season. I'm not a fan of that. That's why I get a little worked up about it. But you will see, expand that playoff to 4 teams or 40 teams, the same programs are going to dominate recruiting. I had a guy last night come at me on Twitter and tell me, how do you expect Boise State and Houston to compete with Alabama and Ohio State in recruiting if they can't have a shot at the playoff? And I told him, I don't expect them to compete with them, period. Like, I can guarantee you in this upcoming recruiting cycle, Alabama and Ohio State, I don't care how big your playoff is, will sign 25 kids rated higher than the highest rated kid that signs with Boise. And it'll happen the next cycle and the next cycle and the next cycle. I don't care if Boise makes the playoff. It's going to happen the next cycle and the next cycle and the next cycle. What you think recruits are looking for versus what they are looking for are two different things. And that's a good program at Boise. Like, I'm not knocking Boise. You know my belief. My belief is there should be a separate playoff for the G5, and then we could have 2 distinct entertaining products instead of trying to shoehorn 2 entities that don't belong in the same conversation into the same conversation. It's not about quality of team. I mean, the G5 is big. It's not one conference. There's several teams that have that proverbial G5 sticker on their helmet. Inevitably, any given year, they're going to be at the very top of the G5. They're going to be probably 2 or 3 teams that could really compete at the highest levels of Power 5. That's never been my argument. I've never said, and never will I say, I don't even think UCF could compete on a field with Ohio State or Alabama. I mean, they'd probably get beat, but I don't focus on that. I didn't say this year, I doubt Cincinnati could compete with the best teams. It's not that. They could compete with them. The problem is, and always will be, there is a gulf in strength of schedule between what you go through in the G5 to make it to the top versus what you go through at the Power 5 level to make it to the top. Always will be. So I've never even viewed these as belonging in the same conversation. But let me continue, because I've made that point several times. Let me continue, because here's the right strategy. If you want to even out the juice in recruiting, had to clear my throat, sorry. If you want to even out things in recruiting, you need to position yourself for what's coming in the department of name, image, and likeness. I know it just got delayed. It's coming. The programs out there, you mark my words, not the top dogs, they're already there. But programs like Arkansas or Arizona State or Michigan State, programs that we don't talk a lot about as being there in the top 10 on National Signing Day. And you could talk about Cincinnati, Houston, Memphis, the G5 types. The programs out there that learn to properly leverage and harness name, image, and likeness legislation when things become legal that aren't legal right now, and the programs that are able to do that and own the transfer portal, those are going to be programs that even it out a lot more than teams that, if we ever expand the playoff, find their way into being the 7 seed one year. It's not going to make a bit of difference. I'm telling you that. You're going to have to find out the hard way if you disagree with me. I know the way it's going to have. It's not going to have the impact you think it's going to have. But if you're able to put together very unique packages in the name, image, and likeness department, if you're able to have partnerships between your university and some big-time brands in the name, image, and likeness department, then all of a sudden, you got stuff kids actually do care about. They don't care that you had the 6th seed last year locked up, or that you were the number 8 and you played the number 1 and got run by 35 points, but hey, at least we made the playoff. They don't care. They don't care about it. What they care about is, what kind of value can you offer them? That's what they care about. So if you own those two avenues, you put yourself in a lot more advantageous position. Oh, but we won't have opt-outs, will we? Listen, you may be somewhat right about this. You know, if you expand the playoff, then there are going to be a few more meaningful games later in the year, meaningful meaning having playoff ramifications tied to them, than there would have been otherwise. I don't use that language. I don't call games meaningless. I don't do that because I love the sport, but a lot of people do. I got a question for you, though. Who promised you that a kid will never opt out of a playoff game? I know your logic tells you they wouldn't, but see, logic's a funny thing. Logic evolves based on new realities. 10 years ago, we didn't have playoff in the sport, did we? And no one in their right mind would ever even talk about the words opt out. No one would even say that in college football, much less if you were in what is now known as a New Year's Six game or a BCS game. Like, you're going to the Fiesta Bowl, you're going to the Orange Bowl. Yeah, it's not the BCS title game, but those are huge games. No one would ever opt out of those. Well, then, here's what's ironic, and here's why I don't think expanding the playoffs is the answer to any of this. We had a pre-playoff world where only 2 teams made the title game, and yet no one was ever opting out. Then we expand and we go to a 4-team playoff, and then after a couple of years, players start opting out. And now the answer to solving what the playoff brought with it is to expand the playoff more. Okay, so some playoff led to opt-outs because, the teams that didn't make the playoff got told their games were meaningless. So let's expand the playoff more. More playoff will mean less opt-outs. No, it won't. No, it won't. You're going to render the other bowl games totally meaningless, even more so than you have already. But I don't know who told you a kid would never opt out of a playoff game. But if you got a team that's a 7 seed that is a 24.5-point underdog, all it takes is one. All it takes is one instance of a big-time kid opting out of a playoff game. Then you have a trend on your hands. This is not how you stop opt-outs. It's not how you do it at all. Do you want to know an actual fix? An actual fix is to convince the NCAA, or do it without them, that there should be actual compensation packages and revenue sharing packages tied to these bowl games to incentivize the bowl game. And I'm not just talking about paying both teams the same amount. Like if you make the Meineke Car Care Bowl, which I don't think exists anymore, we're not just going to give every kid on every team $7,500. Do it like the XFL used to do with their paychecks. No, the winner is going to take 75% of the pot to divvy up amongst their roster, and the loser is going to take 25%. You're not getting paid until you play in the game, though. If you want to actually make bowl games meaningful again, after the damage that you've done to them by calling them meaningless, that's an actual fix. Not this garbage that people are talking about expanding the playoff. That's not fixing anything. What that's doing is looking at the front yard, saying, Colin, we got a weed in the front yard, and then Colin says, I'll fix it, and then he runs a lawnmower over the weed and says, look, the weed's gone. No, it's not. The weed's going to be back in 2 days. If you grew up in the South, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You just had a temporary fix. You put lipstick on the pig, and then you feel good about yourself. You got your expanded playoff. You're not fixing anything. How about having actual fixes? Don't get me wrong. There are things that need to be fixed about this sport. But I want to tell you one of the very detrimental aspects that you have the power to fix. And, it sounds kind of like I'm hopping point to point right here. It's all connected. There are a lot of voices in this sport right now that have no business in this sport. You know exactly who I'm talking about. You can look around on Twitter and know the clowns who are not passionate about this sport. They don't have this sport's best interest at the forefront of their work. They don't seem to love what they're doing. They view it as a job or a chore. They were on the career interstate headed one direction, and fate made them get off at the exit ramp they didn't really want to get off on, and it said sports media. And so for whatever reason, here they are. Those people do not need to have a valued voice at this table. But I'm not advocating for anyone to lose their job. Far be it from me to say that. What I'm telling you is you got the power. Your clicks, your readership, your subscription, whatever the case may be, where your eyeballs go and where your attention goes, energy will then flow in this industry. It's what's given someone like me the opportunity to go from running some independent YouTube channel out of a news studio in Columbus, Georgia 2 years ago to working for the biggest media company on planet Earth 2 years later. You did that. And so if you did it with me, I'm watching our dude RJ Young go from doing an independent channel of his own to being hired by Fox Sports the other day. And congratulations to him, by the way. It's not about whether you agree with folks all the time. It's about getting people who are passionate about the game and love the game and giving them your attention and looking away from these clowns on national platforms who do nothing but trash this sport in really fancy terminology sometimes so they're able to dress it up enough. You have that power. And there's one more thing you have the power to do. You have the power as a fan, as a collective, as a monolith. College football fans have the power to hold their athletic departments accountable. Because really at the forefront of what it's going to take to fix college football is not expanding the playoff. It's not lowering the scholarship cap limit. If you did nothing more than made better hiring decisions on the front end, you would reap the benefits on the back end. There is no exclusivity that ensures only a few teams are going to win in this sport. There isn't. If there was, LSU would never have made it to the table last year. They went from having not made the playoff to making it and winning. Why? Because they got the right coaches in there, they had the right transfer mix in there, they had the right culture, they had the right players. Like, they did it. Okay, Texas is capable of that. Southern Cal's capable of that. Tennessee's capable of that. Clemson has shown you how to do it. They've only become a national program, a national powerhouse in the last few years. It's not the system keeping you down. Some people make crappy hires, you get crappy results, and then you say, well, this college football, this complex out here, this system, it's keeping us down. You're keeping you down. In a lot of cases, the mirror is what's keeping you down, not the system. So these are some actual fixes that I think could take place in college football that would actually yield positive results to where 5 years from now, you got several more folks at the table because they've done what they need to do on the front end and they've rewired programs and they've changed their way of thinking. That's how you get positive results, not running the lawnmower over the weed, which is what a lot of people are suggesting, whether they know it or not.